My name is Nayaswami Anand, and for those of you who don't know this place, we are filming from Ananda, Europa, located in Nocera Umbra, outside of Assisi, Italy, in the beautiful Umbrian countryside. We are standing in the iconic Ananda Temple of Light that would normally be filled with a large variety of international guests and community members. Our community is not closed due to the need to quarantine because of the virus, but we are closed in cooperation with the protocols issued by the Italian government. We are a community of 80 plus people. We run various businesses. We have an online Kriya ministry, and Kriya outreach, and we are all committed to daily practice of Kriya Yoga and to living the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. During this period that we are closed to the public, we are concentrating more energy on our organic farms and to developing our online projects. Until we can congregate again, we want to continue to serve you by streaming our meditations, our classes, our yoga, and if the social distancing permits it, we might even try to share a couple of concerts with you. Those of you who know Ananda well know that the events that we see in the world today are something that we've been anticipating. If you look at the world, you see really broken social models. We see broken energy models. We see broken transportation models. Moreover, consumerism and the practice of animal husbandry just do not go hand in hand with maintaining or sustaining a healthy global ecosystem. And for that, Ananda feels that we have specific answers to these problems. And that answer is called Small Communities Solution. And for that reason, we want to open our hearts and our lives to you during this time. We've been asked to stay home, to generally stay home, and this is a time to reflect. It's a good time, as Jesus said, to seek the kingdom of God within you. Jesus in the King James Version said, "If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light." But really, are we more concerned with the coronavirus? Are we more concerned with the financial situation of the world? Do we want to dedicate our lives to being still and knowing God, as the Bible says? These are things and these are reasons why we at Ananda really want to share how to meditate classes with you, how to reprogram the grooves of our brains to rid us of fear and help us to grow. So in closing, I want to offer our lives and our hearts, but in closing, I'd like to share something that I received, a note that I received from a new acquaintance to Ananda. He is a financial consultant in Rome, and he is, I think, of Scottish origin. He said, "Hello, Anand. As I spend more time and deepen my involvement at Ananda, I am beginning to see more clearly that you all have something truly wonderful together that no academic, whether it be an economist or a politician, will understand without having the experience. Your demonstration of how to live is not only compelling, but it is necessary. And we do feel that. We want to share what we have with you. It is a necessary part of fixing this world. There are solutions and they can be inspiring. So I'd like to leave you with this thought. I'd like to leave you with this prayer. Lord, may we serve you, and may we be able to awaken thy light and thy love in all thirsting souls. God bless you from Ananda, Europa.
Hi there, Anand.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's a great joy. Thank you for inviting me, Ramurti, and hello to you all in Los Angeles. Really a joy to be here. So Ramurti, you sent me a group of questions and or a series of questions, and so maybe I should just start with some of those. It was, in fact, what we're seeing now is why I did the interview with Vandana Shiva. I met her a little more than a year ago in Findhorn community in Scotland, and she has some very interesting perspectives on what's happening, and she very, very much appreciated what we're doing, not only us at Ananda Assisi, but she said this whole idea of community, she said, it is the only solution. And she was very firm with me 3 different times. She said, it is the only solution. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because one of the first questions that Ramurti posed was, how do we hold it? And how do we look to the future? How do we really formalize, or how do we organize our lives? And it's really a good question, because frankly, we're in a situation where we don't see. It's very difficult to see where things are going and what to do. So one of the things that I'd like to emphasize is that why she said we're the only solution, community's own solution, is that you really do see broken models. You see homelessness on streets all over the world, and I just received communication from the European Economic and Social Committee, and they are basically saying 24 million jobs here in Europe won't return. And I suspect once you all come out of your what we used to call it here, stai a casa, stay at home. And it was pretty bleak here for a while, because actually in some of the major cities, you would find people actually in their apartments with, in fact, I'll just relate, one of our members here at Ananda Assisi, her mom lives up near Parma, and she's in a little town. She's by herself, and all day long, every hour, the church bell would toll, announcing another death, and these loudspeakers cars would go up and down the road going, "Stai a casa, stay at home." And she said her mother was absolutely just frozen with fear on her couch. And of course, anytime she looked at the television, what did she see but the news of the virus? And so it really terrorized people. There was a hospital in Bergamo, and in one day, they had 800 deaths in that one hospital. Excuse me. So it was completely demoralizing and really quite a trauma for many people. So we're coming out of that. You guys are more or less heading into the thick of it. It sounds like, if the numbers are increasing the way I understand they are. And so once you come out of that, America may very well be in the same situation that Europe is finding itself in, which is a lot of jobs that don't come back. And even if your job comes back, economically, they're talking about serious repercussions. So I want to look at it just with you all, just from a different angle. What if this whole job market and this whole process of consumerism, what if it doesn't come back to normal? As you all, most of you probably all know, Yogananda was very insightful about the times that we're heading into. And he, in one particular place, he said, there will be a return to the land. And whether or not you think it's true or not, you will find what I say is true. I mean, it's the closest thing to a prophecy, really. It was very firm. You will see, if you don't think it's going to happen, you will be mistaken. That's basically what he said. And so there's a very, very interesting film that maybe some of you might enjoy watching. It was from quite some time ago, but Cuba, when the embargo happened and the Soviet Union collapsed, they found themselves immediately landlocked, no imports whatsoever. So they had no fuel, they had nothing basically to work their lives with. They were isolated, and they immediately started tearing up parking lots around the condominiums. They embarked, and there was no fertilizers, no insecticides, none of the petroleum imports, which Vandana Shiva so strongly rallies against. She just is very much against the petroleum industry and what has happened to our lives as a result of petroleum. And so in any event, Cuba was this amazing story where they just pulled themselves up by their bootstraps by basically producing all the food they needed to within their little isolated country. And they no longer had automobiles, they no longer had any imports. They basically were on their own. And it's a remarkable film to see what they did. And I hope, and I don't think we're going to be seeing that kind of drastic situation, but I do have a tendency to feel that if we honor what Yogananda's vision was, it was to help to create self-sustaining world brotherhood colonies. So what does that mean for us, for you all in the cities? I'm outside the cities, but we're certainly right near cities, and we have many, many meditation groups in the cities. And so what does it mean, especially if we see that consumerism is broken and it doesn't work? If I could just show you here, there are picture frames, there are beautiful flower vases, there is a beautiful lotus candle right here. There are cassette tapes. There is a cabinet here with certain things that we collected from Swami's life, sort of little museum. But if we don't continue to buy all these individual items, you end up putting somebody out of work. And so we're in a process where we're bound to consume, and if that process breaks down at all, then we don't buy that, and somebody is out of work. So it's a really serious system, and that's why Vandana Shiva said, it's what you're doing is the only solution. And that is applicable also to those of you in the cities, is that you need to, what Master said, small groups of people, like-minded people, come together and create. I want you to understand something else too that's very interesting. Edgar Casey, it was a very interesting reading. He was quoted as saying he was in his trance that he often would go into to see the future or to give people advice to see in sort of an intuitive perspective on the questions that people were asking him. Somebody asked him, where are safe areas? And he talked about all over the world, that Australia, America, he had mentioned many countries, but he also mentioned that it was better to not be so close to the coastal areas. And then he said, but you should realize that safe areas are not geological in nature, they are produced by groups of consciousness. And so that's where you all of you, also your extended membership, that's a very important thing that you're doing, is producing a group consciousness, because those are where safe areas are produced. And we all know, those of us on the path, that if we tune in, we're guided intuitively to do the right things, to be in the right places. So as for the future, it's a very, very difficult thing. The European community in that protocol, if you will, that they just issued, they were saying, if this recovery from coronavirus will not work unless we look at restructuring society. We too, not quite like America, but we too in Europe see homeless problems. You see more and more people are marginalized by this consumer system. So we're in the middle of a system that is very difficult to break, because practically the whole Western world, the whole world really is based in it. And yet, the more we need to buy these things, the more we find the environment doesn't support it, can't support it. So that's why Yogananda said, go back to the land with like-minded people, live a simple life, a life of simple living and high thinking. So he said many things that were interesting. When you really look at what he tried to give us for the future, he often said, when I'm gone, then you will realize what I have tried to do for you. Because he spoke in a way during his life that I'm sure many people probably thought he was a little bit off the wall, because it wasn't pertinent to his time. Jyotish said once, if you really think about that garden party where he said, young people go north, south, east, west, spread this message of world brotherhood colonies. Jyotish said, who was he talking to then? All those people are dead and gone. But he said, my words are in the ether and they shall move the West. So I suspect we're in for a very different time. I think it's a very good idea for our Ananda communities in the cities to have backup plans. We want to serve, and it isn't necessary to leave the cities unless you feel that that the situation deteriorates enough. But that's the part of the future we can't see very clearly. I'll mention, you'll hear in the video that I'll share that I mentioned to Vandana Shiva about an interview with Musk. And he said, look, there's so many, well, the reality is there's so many people who are unemployed and whose jobs might not come back. So the idea by the Green Deal in America, and also the Pope subscribes to this, is that there be a universal basic income. And that would be to help those people who are marginalized, who either lost their jobs don't come back, and they're pushed either out of their mortgages or out of their rents. If that was a worst case scenario, that basic income helps then to be able to keep people in their homes until we rework where we're going. And so his point was, well, that won't work because economy is based on things. And if you don't have things, if you don't buy things, you don't have an economy. And that's exactly the point why Vandana Shiva says it can't keep sustaining. We just have to accept the fact that we're in a system of consumerism that is based on us continuing to buy things. And so that's why she said those who are willing and can to go back to the land and in that way, with like-minded groups of people, just simply try to build a self-sustaining colony or community. Again, if we return to your situation in the cities, you can do that right in the cities. You can also have a backup plan. Just want to share this story. Somebody here when Swami was here, somebody from Rome raised their hand in a discourse he was doing and said, "Are you saying, Swami, that I should just leave my job in Rome and move to the country?" And he said, "No, I realize you cannot do that. But what you can do is on the weekends with a like-minded group of people, you either have a place to farm, you take," he said, of course he was speaking here in Italy, he said, everyone probably has an uncle Tino, or an Uncle Lorenzo, or somebody who's out in the country who has a little villa, or who is a farmer in the country. Or he said, go together, buy a piece of property, and go out and do weekend retreats. Have a place where you can store your garden tools, grow a garden together. Just begin that group, that sort of group think, because if the economy does have the kind of problems that Master spoke about, and he was very, very firm. In fact, I want to emphasize this. Swami said toward the end of Master's life, he would pound on the podium and say, you just do not see it, that it's a very, very difficult time. And so if this is it, and it certainly has every indication that as we come out of this and those jobs don't recreate. And remember, I don't want to emphasize this so much that it seems like we're talking about complete disaster and breakdown. He did say, and Brother Bhaktananda confirmed this to me, I said, but he was a direct disciple. Brother Bhaktananda was a direct disciple who is no longer living, but he said to me, Master said that we would see a depression that would make the one in 1921 look like a picnic. And then, so I must have had an expression on my face, because he looked very sternly at me and said, and he said picnic, meaning that that 29 was a little thing compared. But even in 29, the point that needs to be emphasized is that there was, even if half the population is unemployed, and that's a lot of people unemployed, there's still 50% that are employed. It's not that the whole thing breaks down, but you don't want to, since we have the warning of the masters, we want to be prudent, not out of fear, but just we're fortunate. In fact, one other direct disciple said, when you look at what happened in 29, people panicked and their values were all tied up with their level of wealth and their job. And there's terrible, terrible situations because of that. The point is that those who have a flexible mind are the ones then that come out of this, who are led not out of fear, but out of intuition and out of guidance to do the right thing. there's a solution for everything. And I think Yogananda tried to give us a wide arc of different options if or when, he said not if, he said when this situation comes. So maybe we come out of this, maybe every government is throwing a ton of money at the situation, trying to stimulate growth, stimulate jobs. But the point needs to still be made that this system of consumerism is broken, and it was broken even before the coronavirus. You started to see what was happening in San Francisco and LA with the joblessness, with prices so high. I have friends who are telling me, I mean, you all will probably commiserate with this, that monthly rents can be as high as $3,640 a month. We're out here in the outskirts of, or in the countryside of Italy, and even in Italy, you can have 600 to 1,000 euro a month rents. We're out here where our rents are 250 to 350 euros a month for house rentals or that kind of thing. But it got out of hand, really, where people who couldn't pay those kinds of rents and mortgages are marginalized and they end up being on the street. So consumerism is broken, and it's a good thing for us to start to have that in our minds, that it may get worse before it gets better. Again, not out of fear, but just out of being prudent to take whatever steps we need to. We here in Assisi have the good fortune to have help from people who have said, okay, if Master said that, we want to help Ananda Assisi become a self-sustaining world brotherhood colony. And so we, in fact, have the whole community, especially during lockdown, has got behind our farming project. We have now we have under cultivation 4 times the amount of fruits and vegetables that we did the year before. We have grain fields of oats that are under cultivation. We actually had a big field of sunflower plants in order, not necessarily, they were actually plants for oil rather than for the seeds. You could eat them, but there are 2 varieties, and one is cultivated more for oil production. That particular crop as the one crop that has failed us. Either we weren't nutritional enough in our soil, or the seeding was, I'm not sure, we had a lot of rain after we seeded. It could be that those seeds washed down, because it is true that down toward the bottom of the hill where we planted, it's a better yield, but still not effective. So it's really not something we can cultivate. So we'll go in this fall. We're going to go with cover crops in order to enrich the soil. But that's the kind of thing that we're doing, but we're in the country. It's more for you all, I think, to heed maybe what Swami said, because you want to serve, and you want to do your part to be in tune and to be of service to people until it just simply doesn't work. And if that happens, then you want to have an option in your back pocket. So I also want to emphasize that it isn't my intention to instill alarm, but rather just that we be prudent, that we accept mentally that we're flexible to enter into very possibly a scenario that most of us in the time that we've grown up and through our adult lives, we've never seen anything like it. We already know that that's true, but we have to anticipate that economy, that the whole structure might change. Just one last thought there even. Master said, you will see changes in the global financial system, and you won't like it. So his solution was step out of the money system as much as you can and be free from that. So I just saw yesterday that they have a bill in the Senate in America to introduce digital currency. And the scuttlebutt, if you will, is that basically we're going to go toward a cashless society. And of course, you have two sides to that coin. You have the conspiracy theorists who say we're heading toward total control. But you have the other side that says a cashless system actually has a lot of more freedom. There's basically it's easier to pay. We're obviously animated and into a computerized system that would allow a digital currency now. So let's see, even that, even the standard greenback, the dollar bill, the credit cards, who knows how all that will change, but there's a lot of change in the works. And so Ramurti, I'm assuming you're my host. And so I'm happy to field questions.
You know, you mentioned the cashless society and the digital currency and the conspiracy. One overriding conspiracy or theory that people have about a cashless society is tied in with the Bible and the book of Revelations, talking about the Antichrist and the mark of the beast. I was wondering what your thoughts are on that, you know, with the idea that everybody would have a mark and they couldn't buy or sell without it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. For a long time in the early days of Ananda, we had a good friend who was a popular author at the time. His name was Dannion Brinkley, and he wrote the book called Saved by the Light. So he visited the Palo Alto church. I remember attending his his talk, but he had a near-death experience, and he talked about that what he saw in his near-death experience was that they would develop these chips that would be embedded under the skin. And again, during lockdown, I noticed that they were doing that. It was just a simple little injection in your finger, and then you could maybe some of you all saw it too, and then you could run your finger by the vending machines, anything you wanted, and it would automatically debit your account because you had that chip in your finger. Of course, Dannion Brinkley's forecast, or what he said he saw, was a little more sinister in that he said the governments would use that to control if you were old and a little bit useless to the system. That chip also had the ability, sounds a little science fiction, but he said it would have the ability to terminate your life if you were, and so there is that. And he predicted in that book that there would be the sort of like the haves and the have-nots, that those who refused the digital system went to the country or went to communities, and they were sort of ostracized, or there was a polarization from those in the cities who voted for security and those in the country who voted to be independent and not under that system. And it was extreme, and I'm not sure some of the things he said would happen haven't happened in the time frame anyway that he said. But you can also say that for Master, you can say that for even for Edgar Cayce. So it's understandable that dates and time frames maybe don't always flow with what people, or what the seer might have thought, or the dates that they mentioned. But so I don't know how much more to go into it than that I suppose there is a potential for that. I'm never even quite sure that that's the correct interpretation of the Bible, but I don't have an alternative. And so it very well could be. The point that's very important to make, I think, is that I think it was there's an article that Master wrote. I think it's in the Divine Romance, but I found it in a couple of other locations where the name of the talk or the name of the article that Yogananda wrote was called The End of the World, ? And he talked about the fact that the end of the world is far away because he said this world exists for one and one purpose only, and that is for, as Swami says in the Festival of Light, for the birth of self-consciousness. And he said there's a growth, the purpose of this world and the purpose of the universe is for individual growth of self-awareness. So we're all these, if you will, individual units of self-awareness. We're all coming up through these stages, and we're in a human body that has the highest or the most refined nervous system, which allows us to self-reflect. And so that's why we can self-reflect and turn our attention, if you will, inward and say, I am. See, an animal, Master said, has a degree of self-awareness, but it's a much dimmer degree of self-awareness. Just as an example, I once was with a friend in Florida, and he had a dog with us, and we were out in the countryside. The dog ran after somebody and ended up laying a big side of flesh open on the side of his body. And we had a needle and thread, but that was what we had. And we were really concerned that we couldn't leave this gaping wound open. So we laid the dog down, we talked to him, and we sewed that with needle and thread, sewed that flesh back together. He didn't even wince. Every time we pushed the needle through his hide, he didn't wince. He accepted our calm talk. He laid on his side. But, and what Yogananda said is animals have a dimmer sense. They have of self-awareness. But he said, if we hurt our hand, if a dog hurts his paw, he doesn't say, oh, it's my paw. But we as humans say, oh, it's my hand. And that, Yogananda said, increases our level of pain, if you will, because we associate ownership with it. And that's why in that very talk, and many of you might have heard it, he says, and that's why I want you to be tough. I want you to be tough. So that's, of course, part of our training. But really, the point that I want to make is that it isn't the end of the world. And even though there are biblical prophecies and there are prophecies like Master gave, he said, we keep moving through this yuga, and we keep moving toward, in fact, an arc of higher consciousness. And so it may be that, I don't know, I'm going to say Western society, but it may be that we see that kind of polarization. We may see that kind of technology. We may have to be forced to make those decisions. I think probably the decision that many of us are going to have to make, possibly, is first decision over and above a piece of technology would be, are we going to be forced to take a vaccination? There's a lot of pros and cons for a vaccination, and I don't want to get into it here, but the point is, will it be a choice or will it be something that's mandated? And so that will be a very interesting decision that's in front of us, I think. So I think we just need to be ready to, it may not be interesting because it may not be come up to even be an issue, because what I've also heard is that the virus is mutating. So they're having a very difficult time trying to find a vaccination because of the fact that it mutates. So it's a very uncertain time. And that cashless currency, I don't know, it may be that we see it whether we like it or not. It may be that's what Master meant when he said there'll be great changes and you won't like them. But there again, he said the idea is that if you all can form collective cooperative groups where he said the key is to use as least amount of money as possible, because the more you barter your services, the more you end up using less money and the less you're tied to that system, if it ends up being a system of manipulation or just a system that you don't like. But when he said there will be a return to the land, I have to wonder why. And because we might be seeing, the virus might only be the tip of the iceberg. And in a way, if it is, I could see Divine Mother, or I could see the Master's guidance as possibly the virus being one of the softest ways we could enter into helping us accept and embrace a change that's going to be rather drastic in front of us. Again, I could be wrong. This might not be what he talked about, but it has every telltale sign of being the precursor for a great change in the way society is structured and in the way that we're living. So it's sort of a long around the bend way of answering your question, but I would say we're going to probably have to accept that there are certain kinds of those changes. And I think the best thing is be mentally flexible and ready to take any turn that you need to, because the long and short of it is we have each other. And there's a lot of truth to this song that Swami wrote, "Many Hands Make a Miracle," and we've seen it here. I had no idea we could turn on a dime and change in the drastic ways we've changed here. We closed our retreat facility and money simply ceased to come in that door. But in a matter of weeks, we have mounted online classes, and they're really, really nicely watched. And we turned on a dime and went to gardens and the next step, of course, we'd like to do if we're going to do a self-sustaining World Brotherhood colony is we need to take care of some power issues. So we need to start with battery systems and sun and wind systems that would keep those battery systems charged. Those are available. Those of you who know Italy know we have an Il Rifugio complex, which is our center. It's our dining room and it's our temple complex. It's the well, one of the main wells of the community. But those takes pumps and it takes heating systems. We have a wood and solar heating system that works the floor heating and the radiator systems heating that you guys in LA don't need to think about that much compared to what we do here. But those take energy, of course, and the refrigerators and what it takes to cook them for 80 or 100 or 150 people. Those are all big systems, but they make the systems. They make battery packs that run on for 2 days at a time without a charge, or 4 days at a time without a charge. We very rarely get wind or sun, one or the other. If we don't have sun, we almost always have wind. So we could keep those kinds of battery systems charged, and we could actually be self-sufficient. It takes money to put those things in place. And there again, those are things you guys can be thinking about either within the city as a group of people who just, if you have a place where you can do community garden, or a place where you all can go out of the city. And it may be that you end up doing a system where the issues of digital currency and the mark and that kind of thing aren't applicable. It's going to be, I hope, we're talking about America especially, but we're talking about mostly the free world. I'm hoping that there are choices that are going to be in front of us, and that it isn't necessarily something that's imposed upon us. However, the change may be imposed upon us, but the choices you make, I hope, are always free choices. So.
There another question?
Yeah, I have a question. You're talking about the self-sustaining community, but here in LA, we have land, but what about like natural water sources? Do you know anything about having to live near a natural water source?
Yeah, in the city, you're going to have to accept what's there. And it doesn't mean, again, I think it's important to emphasize, because we talked a lot here with Swami about whether we should, I mean, there was a lot of talk about to what extent should we prepare. And he said, we need to understand that it doesn't mean that we actually go back to the prehistoric times, to where we're cast back out of technology and out of resources. So it doesn't necessarily mean in the cities that you won't have your water resources, and you may just simply have to use whatever resources are there. We all have ways. In fact, we have natural water resources here, but they're high calcium. They're you still have to use, or we still prefer to use, the systems that will take some of the calcium out, the systems that will purify the water. So it's maybe, even though we could consider a well a natural water resource, we don't use it in its natural state. We mostly always will filter or just clean it in any way. So in that respect, I wouldn't worry too much. I think it's more important that you have food, that you have a roof over your head, and that you have like-minded people, because that's where your sense of camaraderie and your sense of family, it's really important. I want to emphasize something. We have another American couple who aren't associated with our community, with the Ananda community here. They live nearby, and so every Thanksgiving we invite them, because they're obviously that's a holiday that they grew up with that Europe doesn't necessarily share or have. But we invite them, and I called them 2 years ago. I said, Thanksgiving's here, and if you guys want to come. And they said, no, thank you. She said, she said, I don't know how you do it, because you have so many people. And for me, sometimes too many people is also, it sets me off. She said, but I want you to know something. She said, you all there have a sense of community. I'm friends with many of you. I've had some of you to my house for dinner. We've been there on occasion. And she said, you have to realize this was a few years ago. She said, I have Trump anxiety. She said, I have North Korea anxiety. She said, I have environmental climate change and anxiety. But she said, just knowing you're there, just knowing that you guys are there, you're together. She said, I have a sense of belonging, or a sense of community. Even though I don't come very often, I know you're there, and it gives me a great sense of security just knowing that. So those are the things I think we have to concentrate the most on, is that you do have a group of people who are going to be together, who are going to be looking at whatever comes up in our lives ahead of us. You have a group of people who you can rely on to say, okay, where should we go? What should the next thing be? So I would put a natural water system down the road, and unless water actually stops for you in LA, then actually it's time to get out, I suspect. But that's probably an unlikely scenario. I would imagine that your preoccupation might be more as you experienced with the Floyd protests and things. When people are in a city, when people are angry, that's a time where I know it's a little more unsettling. And that again is when you as a group can make decisions together about whether it's time to to have a place already ready out in the country, and that's where you go. Or there was a little note that came up from Murti and I missed it.
It's a comment on water resources.
Okay.
You're saying it's valuable to make yourselves aware of natural sources in your area, even urban, rivers, creeks, springs, etc., and to have a high quality filtration system.
Yeah.
So that was the comment.
The woman who asked about having quality water in the city, that's something that I've also investigated. I have my green energy credential from the University of Colorado Boulder. I've experience with straw bale solar installation. And one thing that you can do, and I know people who are already doing it, they're not necessarily Ananda Sangha, but people who are aware, either as you say, of revelations, or in other ways, they simply know that life is changing. They're actually building backyard gardens now. And one of the things that you do, it's actually called rainwater harvesting. And if you Google it that way, rainwater harvesting, you will find all kinds of capture systems that you can use and have in your backyard. That way you're prepared before you're left with nothing to water your garden. There are ways to use the natural incline of your roof to capture water that is stored and filtered in a huge chamber, which even if it's only 2 feet off the ground, now you have gravity flow in order to feed your pipes into the garden or to feed an outdoor shower. So it's called rainwater harvesting, and you can do it in the smallest of backyards from your roof. So that's something that I've been looking into too, and that's a really good thing. I wanted to tell the person who asked about that. But my question is completely different, because I'm doing two things at the same time. I was fully aware that these changes were coming because Master told us so. And I've been listening to Swami tell us this for years. So I knew all of this was coming, and I chose to remain a teacher, instead of going into farming, because that's where I am serving God's purpose for these children. You know, I'm managing to teach them to think for themselves in spite of the public school system. And so it's working very, very well for me to stay a teacher. But I'm already ready. I'm almost 60 years old, and I'm stronger and faster than most 60-year-olds, except maybe that excludes the yoga enthusiasts. Okay? And I am ready to join a community, to build a permaculture farm, or to participate in a permaculture farm. But I don't feel like I have enough to offer because I'm smaller than other strong, hard workers. And I'm wondering if Ananda, as a Sangha, can we offer something? Can we offer a reading? Can we offer a set of instructions to people on exactly how to do this? Can we go ahead and say, get 4 neighbors, one of them do the rainwater capture, one of them put in the greenhouse, one of them study beekeeping. Can we come up with a collective? One of them learn to sew. Can we come up with a way, something that we actually recommend to people, so that, you know, not just those who had Master's guidance can survive in the country and be ahead of the game and at peace, even though great turmoil is coming? Is there something that Ananda Sangha can offer? Is there something written already? Is there someone who feels capable of putting out those instructions? You know, I'm sure Pablo would like to help with that. I know him from some straw bale practices. I'm talking about the Pablo who works up at Ananda Village.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically that's my question. It's twofold, okay? Because even though I'm doing this thing where I'm staying to be a teacher and I'm aware of the green energy, I want to go and join community, a fully sustained community. But I haven't been able to find anybody who really feels ready to go, really feels like starting to work towards it, even though they feel like it's probable. I need to find that group, and I need to begin it. I need to begin now. I'm already liquidating assets so that I could contribute to materials. No, but where do I go?
Thank you for your question. And, you know, Swami years ago wrote the book called Cooperative Communities, How and Why to Start Them. And that's really, and then of course he has the book called Cities of Light. He's sort of taken a few of those books and condensed them over the years. But those are very good resources. And Ananda Sangha, whether it's localized in Los Angeles or at the Village or Sacramento or Seattle, all of them are your resources, because that's what I'm saying. We also did what you did, Heidi. We, for years, wanted to move in the direction even just of developing more community. We've been a retreat center, and we built that up beautifully, but we, at the cost of actually establishing and building community. But we also found that there was a blessing there. And when it came time for us to turn and to initiate a new direction, we found absolutely the amount of we were sustained and we were supported in that decision. So I think it's fine that you remained a teacher. I think it's fine that you did what you did, because I think there is time. And I think all of those things you mentioned are good. What the beauty of a community is that you have cross talents. We've had people here who also know just the herbs and the plants and the gardening and the permaculture, things that I wouldn't know that much about, but I love doing. There's maintenance and carpentry and plumbing talents that some people know and others don't know. It's the beauty of a cooperative community, is that you have all these talents to trade and to share. So I can only second what you're saying. And what Sangha has to offer is a place where you all can come together and begin to say, okay, what do we want to do as a next step? And that's why even a meditation center, and not necessarily a community, is a place where you have the ability to come together and say, okay, we recognize what the future might be, and let's cooperate and see what we can do. So I can't say much more except that I'm totally behind what you're saying, that it's a cooperative effort. And don't even think about, oh, if I didn't do what I should have done, because right now is the best place to start to go forward, just to say, okay, where I need to start thinking what is unfolding in front of me. But the main thing is, remember, be flexible in your mind. A flexible mind will give you a lot of peace, and it will help you to see the right things. Again, water systems are great, but be sure that you also have a support system, a support group, because that's where you'll find those diverse talents, because water won't be the only, possibly won't be the only issue. So use that Sangha as your point of reference to really try to be more connected and more secure in that way.
I would welcome you to join the community meetings that we have on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 11 a.m. And that would be a time where you could voice. We get together for different types of support and healing prayers and sharing where we're each at. And that would be a group that you could join and voice this concern and share the energy you have towards going this direction. There are a number of other people in the LA Sangha who are very interested in this and working on some aspects of it already. So you might join there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ramurti.
Why don't we go ahead and look at the interview? People who want to stay and see it can, and others can go, and then maybe take a few minutes at the end for questions after it as well.
Explanation, I gave a little bit of an introduction already, and this was a Zoom interview, and so you'll hear a little bit of internet instability, but generally I think you'll all be able to follow it fine. So
Right.
here we go.
Thank you.
So, hello, Dr. Vandana Shiva. As you know, my name is Ananda. I want to welcome you here on behalf of our Ananda Assisi community. Vandana, by way of introduction, announced to people that you are going to be speaking today on returning to the earth, returning to the land. We spoke before about the fact that our communities network, our communities in America are structured under a church, and that allows us to do everything from farming particularly, but to schools and to our markets and to our spiritual practices under one entity. It's a much different challenge here in Europe because every single activity that we want to do requires an individual organizational structures. But regardless of the hurdles that we need to jump through, we are committed to establishing, promoting, creating intentional, cooperative, self-sustaining world brotherhood colonies dedicated to simple living and high thinking. So given the challenges, especially cooperation and self-sustainability, given those challenges, tell us why you would encourage us or anybody to pursue the endeavor of returning to the land.
Well, at any point, returning to the land was a spiritual, ecological, ethical imperative. But it has now become a survival necessity. The Amazon is burning for GMO soya. The palm oil is destroying the Indonesian rainforests. And in each of these, there were sustainable land-based indigenous communities who are being driven out. We've done a food manifesto, food for health manifesto from Navdanya International, and your colleagues can go visit the website of Navdanya International. Mm-hmm. See, most of the diseases that have grown exponentially are because of bad food, because we forgot that food comes from the land. And so, but we are part of the earth. We are made of the same elements that the earth is made of. We are biodiversity. Two of my colleagues have just done studies. One has shown that food with Roundup is leading to antibiotic resistance. And a second one has done a study that shows that corn, soya, GMO feed has given rats leaky gut, which is a disease in America that's prevalent among children because they're not getting real food. So whether you look at the food we eat, whether you look at the sicknesses and diseases we are being affected by, returning to the land is the only way we can live happy, healthy lives. But there's yet another reason why this is important. It's important because in this pandemic, half of working people in the cities have lost their livelihoods. 3.3 billion people work, 1.9 billion have lost it all. And they're not going to get it back. So where will the work come from? There's only one place. While the greed of corporations finds 99% humanity as useless, the land and the earth is saying, I need your hands to give me care. I need your hands to give me love. For the earth, none of us are redundant. She is inviting us back to the land. And the final reason why it's so important to go to the land, go back to the land, return to the earth, is all the destruction, the planetary destruction, including the social destruction. You know, why are people having to march on the streets? Who's ruling the world right now? It's a handful of technology barons.
Yep.
Who take our friendships, who take our exchanges. And you know, the less community you have in your community, because you're on the land, you talk to each other. You cooperate with each other.
That's
you
right.
don't need to make friends through Mr. Zuckerberg. This is a sickness of society. And humanity needs to be able to be cured of the sickness. That cure lies in return to the land.
Thank you, Vadnana. So it's very obvious to look and see that we have broken transportation models, cultural. We have a broken cultural model. We have broken energy models. We have broken labor models. And so what we're talking about is a complete shift in how we look at life. And that's a gigantic endeavor to try to get this world to think differently, to look at life differently. So you mentioned Musk. I saw an interview with him the other day. I've always appreciated that he made the electric car, but well, in his interview, he said somebody had proposed to him this idea that the Pope and that the Green Deal in America had proposed, try to give everyone a universal basic income. Because you are absolutely right, those jobs are not going to return. And so there's going to be a huge problem. So the point is, how do we make a transition? Because if those jobs never return, we can't just let people, we just can't leave people on the streets. He said, and this I think is the essence of what needs to be confronted in modern life today, is he said, well, that idea of basic income doesn't work because we need things. And if you don't have things, you don't have an economy, you don't have progress. But it's exactly that point of consumerism, the environment just doesn't sustain it. Rather than what about our jobs, what can we do to a transition, totally different cultural transition to return to the land. So when you speak to us this way, really you at least in this community, you touch our heart, because we do meditate. We are a spiritual-based community, and we do try to feel the presence of consciousness in the land, in the trees, in the rock. And we need to not just push that away. We need to tune into what is important and what we can do to change. And that's where it's a gigantic task to try to convince especially the economists who, like I said to you before, economy wants us each to own a refrigerator, each to own a car, each to own a house. And that just continues to destroy the environment. The environment at some point, after there's 8 billion or 9 billion people, just simply won't sustain that kind of growth.
When you use three words, Anand, and let me just reflect on that. So you use the word consume and consumption and consumer. We weren't consumers till a few decades ago.
That's right.
We had needs. We needed water, we needed food, and the land gives all of that to us. The word consume, its etymological roots are to destroy. By separating into parts which cannot ever be reunited. To expend by use or to do away with completely. So living is not consumption. Meeting your needs is not consumption, destroying is consumption. And this was therefore used as the word for TB, for tuberculosis, during the Middle Ages. So we must basically get out of this idea that we are consumers. We are not consumers. When we become consumers, we lubricate the destruction machine and we become complicit in the destruction of the earth, in the destruction of humanity, in the destruction of cultures, of meaning, of values. And that's why return to the land is so important. We have the potential to be co-creators with the land. We have potential to be co-producers with the land. We recognize the land is creative, the land is, and you know, this is where the mechanistic idea of Boyle and Bacon made us believe that the earth is dead matter. So we appropriated her creativity and denied it. And therefore we do all kinds of violence. We put chemical fertilizers, we spray pesticides, we spray Roundup, because we assume she's dead. The minute you say, the land is alive, and I have a role to be co-creators with this amazing land, land bursts back into amazing biodiversity on our Navdanya farm. And I hope at some point we can deepen this partnership between your community and Navdanya. I started to save seeds. So we grow biodiversity of crops. Then the pollinators came back. We have 6 times more pollinators than the forest. Our water has come back 70 feet higher than when we started. So we do a little bit. That's the point. When nature is living and the land is living, it's not all in your hands. We are not engineering nature. We are serving nature. And in small acts of human service, nature creates amazing things. That is ecology. You also use the word job, you know, when you talked about the old growth forest, that how can you talk about oils and what about our jobs? So I'm doing, actually I was supposed to have come to Assisi for the Economy of St. Francis gathering. And of course, with the lockdown, it has been postponed. I don't know if they'll have to postpone it further. But I've started to write my paper, and it grew into quite a long document. And I started to attach with it a dictionary of words, because words have changed meaning. Today we assume consumption is inevitable, but we realize it's got a very recent history and a bad root. You know the word job in a similar way? You know what job was? It's when they went to the villages in England and stole people for the mines and the factories, because farmers did not want to leave the land. It took 200 years of violence against the peasantry of England to enclose the commons. And the word job it means to cheat. You jobbed a person. You captured them and told them a lie and took them to the city or the mine. So the word job again has a negative root. The word economy, and this is what I was going to do for the Economy of St. Francis. The word economia is the art of living. What it has been replaced by is what Aristotle called chrematistics, the art of money making. Economy comes from the same roots as the word ecology, oikos. Ecology provides the umbrella. Within it, the economy takes care of the household, which is the land, which is the earth. So the highest economy is the economy of the land. The highest economy is the economy of going back to the land. All of this other stuff of money making and greed without limits. It's greed without limit. It's the logic of a cancer cell which doesn't know when to stop growing. And we can go back to the land. And the challenge now is working with local communities and saying, they're unemployed people. Let us create communities of the land. They're people who've lost their jobs. Let's build a whole new economy of meaningful work on the land. And we'll have to build this bottom up. Some places there might be governments that care. I know New Zealand has just said we will not measure growth, we'll measure well-being of our people. Bhutan had done that decades ago. So some places it will be a local government, some places it will be a regional government, some places it will be a national government, but it doesn't matter where your partners are. We need a new partnership with the earth, between people, to move from what I call extractive economies that take and take and take, and circular economies that give and receive without thinking of what they'll receive.
One of the beauties of community, especially a back to the land community, is that you can lock it down. So we closed our guest facility. Nobody else was coming in. Those people who were still outside came when they were ready to come in. We delivered their car to the airport. From the moment they landed and were going to come back home, they started their quarantine. They spent the 2 weeks in their home, and then they could come out and enjoy the community life that we basically had cloistered or closed in. We need a different way to approach the government agencies, because if we don't change quickly, you see that culturally, socially, we continue to deteriorate. We continue to deteriorate on the level of the environment. There's so many levels that if we just come back to village life, a type of village, agricultural village, we need to mount a campaign, and I'm hoping that I might be able to enlist your help in this, because I really feel that we need to address either the Italian Parliament or the European government, but we need to start to wake up the bureaucrats to help them understand that there needs to be a change, and there needs to be we need to facilitate the people who want to go back to the land. We need to help them do that.
So two good pieces of news, especially for Europe. One is a senator who's been, we have an international office in Italy, in Florence and Rome.
Ah, no, I didn't know.
And every time I go to Italy, the parliament always calls me and I interact. And one of the parliamentarians has tabled a private member's bill on agroecology, which in effect is back to the land. To promote an agriculture that is local, circular, and self-reliant. The second is Europe as a whole has passed a new policy called Farm to Fork. 50% reduction in pesticides committed, and we were saying do 100%, but at least they've said 50% by 2030. And more encouragement of biodiversity on farms and more links, farm to fork. So this is local economies. This is already passed at the European level. And your letter, your initiative or to the European community, what I will do is put you in touch with my colleagues in Rome so that they can work with you to move it within Italy and in the European.
Fantastic.
I'll do that.
Thank you. Vandana, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I don't know if you want to close with any comment. I just want you to know how much we appreciate the time you've given us. I hope this is even the beginning of more of these kinds of conversations. So
I look forward to make, like I said, I don't think we have to make too much of an effort. We have to just remove the blocks that prevent people from coming to how many people will have money if they have no work? Yeah. So we'll have very large numbers of people without money to create a new economy. So if you think of it, the conditions today are totally right for a movement which can put everything together. The issues of the planet, the issues of our health, the issues of sovereignty. I think more and more people will want to escape the surveillance system, which has been put in place, to live free from the land. Because you won't need these long distance systems that become an imperative and you're not on the land. So, like I say, there are forces bigger than us at work, and we work to the earth and those forces. And I look forward to taking this further with you. Thank you so much, and my love to your community.
Thank you. Dr. Vandana Shiva, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So are there questions or comments about that interview with Vandana Shiva?
Now, where is she located? Is she in India or is she in Italy or?
Yeah, she's in India. She also basically was in quarantine or stay at home during that interview, and I think still is. I asked her if she was in Delhi, and she said, I think she's up in Rishikesh at the Nabanda farm that she was speaking about on the film. So she's in a very nice place. You could hear the birds in her background when she spoke. She was, in fact, during the interview that I did with her, she was supposed to be in Assisi, as she mentioned, because the Pope actually sponsored also a conference of young people. And so we had signed some of our under 30-year-olds to attend the conference that the Pope actually sponsored in Assisi, and she was invited as one of the people that would speak about the new economy, the possibility of new economy. But as you all know, everything was turned upside down, so she wasn't able to attend. So that was nice that we could do that interview with her in her own home there in, I think in just outside of Rishikesh in Dehradun. That's where her.
Now, is she, I've never heard of her before, so is she like world famous? Does she have like organizations? I mean, what is like her background? I mean,
Yeah, she's an environmental activist that's actually very famous, has spoken to the UN, speaks in almost all the she speaks to almost all the environmental issues and attends probably almost all of the conferences. So she's very definitely a name that is well known. She's sort of takes a strong stand against the big corporations. You could hear her about Zuckerberg, but she's got a pretty strong campaign also against Gates because she felt he was, because he buys into and supports Monsanto, and she's just very much against the oil industry and what it has done as far as the fertilizers and the nutrients and the way that it's damaged the environment. So that's her namesake.
Chris, if you go to the Ananda LA website
okay.
and look at the road ahead under Anand's program, there's a very lengthy, maybe 5 or 6 paragraph explanation of her background and what she's done. Also, if you go to the chat, I put in the name of her organization. It was a little hard to hear. I think I've got it right. Navdanya.
Okay.
Navdanya. And you just Google that. That's her organization. Thank you, Anand. Thank you so much for coming, getting up so early in the morning.
Thank
We
you.
can all relate to that.
Thank you.
As a challenge. And we'll look forward to continuing to hear what happens at Assisi, at the many challenges and the great successes too that you've had there.
Thank you, Ramurti. Thank you all for all of you in LA for tuning into this and to sponsoring this, Ramurti. It was a joy, and we're in a big adventure together. So let's stay connected, and we'll see where our paths take us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.